Tourism has grown to become one of the most viable economic sectors of many countries. Cities and countries such as Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, France, Spain, and Saudi Arabia, among others, are major tourist destinations and are reaping much from tourism business. The World Travel and Tourism Council reports that in 2024 alone, travel and tourism contributed about 10.9 trillion United States dollars to global gross domestic products, GDP. Much of the attractions are historical sites, like the pyramids in Egypt. Nigeria has officially declared 65 monuments as national monuments and has proposed declaration for additional 100 sites as it gears towards exploring the tourism sector to diversify its economy. But how committed is the country to invest in this sector that has huge potential for generating income, creating jobs, and boosting infrastructure development? On the spot, we'll speak to one of the industries in the tourism sector for answers. I'm Joseph Otsam. Welcome to the program. Now, my guest is an influential figure in advertising and marketing industry, armed with an MBA in marketing from the University of Buckingham, England. He possesses an understanding of consumer behavior. His knowledge and skills endeared him to many national and international organizations, where he headed leadership positions to lead transformations. On the spot is the Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments, Olugbile Holloway. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. When you talk about that in Nigeria, for a very long time now, Nigeria have not been projecting this particular aspect regarding its tourism sector. Coming in, you were appointed the DG last year, I think in March.
Correct.
Yeah. Coming in, what was your projection like? What have you been visualizing regarding how to promote this based on what you see tourism do in other parts of the world?
Thank you for that question. So I think to understand the full impact of tourism, we have to know that tourism is an ecosystem. What I mean by that is, for tourism to thrive, you must have the tourist destinations, you must have the infrastructure to get people to those destinations, you must have the security so that people that go there feel safe, and you must also have e-commerce and payment platforms, and so that there can be some commercial aspect to it. Upon assumption of this role, the first things that I noticed was that the sector is very underfunded. A lot of the things that we're hoping to achieve in this sector can only happen when we give the sector the right funding it deserves, because it's from the funding that you will have the infrastructural upgrades.
And it's from government over the years have not realized that this is a sector that
could potentially be a revenue driver for the economy. Now, when you're asking people to pay money for an experience, you have to have invested in creating that experience. So the infrastructure has to be right, the user experience has to be right. When people come to the museums or any tourist center, there must be a value proposition. There must be a reason why I'm asking you to pay your hard-earned money. You must take something from that experience. And for us, it's important that the government understands that once you can upgrade your museums, you can upgrade your tourist sites and the monuments in such a way that people feel proud to be associated with them. People want to refer other people to them, and Now we're in the internet generation. You must create environments that are content worthy, that people want to take pictures of and share with their friends. So what this means is that we can't look at this sector the same way we looked at it in the 80s or the 90s. The world is moving on very quickly with modernization and technology. How do we bring all these things into the museums? And that is my primary focus. My focus is to embark on not just infrastructural upgrades, but even the storytelling, even the audio visuals, and the complete user experience, so that when people come into the museums, it's almost like they're going to watch a film. It's this, you want that same feeling as you would have going to the cinema. You go into the cinema and you expect something, and a movie either delivers on what you expect or it doesn't. And that's what you determine whether that movie was good or a movie was bad. And I think storytelling and how we craft the narrative, we need to be more intentional about this. And that is definitely something that we've prioritized now at the NCMM. And if you follow our social media pages, every Friday we put out one story about a prominent Nigerian figure, and the stories are completely generated using AI, but we keep the stories short so that they can be shared online and that people can start talking about their culture and their heritage again.
Okay, from what you're talking about, it will require a lot of huge investment, very huge investment, because a lot of things go side by side. Even the hospitality business will also go side by side.
Exactly.
That perhaps this could be challenging, because if you look at some of the places that we have are national monuments, we have the museums, some other aspect of the infrastructure themselves are not there.
Yes. Yes.
How will you go about this? Because there's a huge gap there.
I completely agree, and I think that we've come to a point in this conversation as Nigerians where we have to start to tell ourselves the truth. When you look at a commission like the NCMM for me is like the central bank of artifacts. Okay, we have objects that come from the 15th century, for example. We have some objects that go as far back as 1000 BC. When you start with the objects, I feel that our commission is trying to address what I would call the low-hanging fruits. Infrastructure takes time, and like you said, there's a huge cost implication. But I think that we first need to reignite the interest of Nigerians in this sector, in their heritage in the first place. So the first thing is enlightenment and education. You want people to start to feel that pride, to have that curiosity of where do I come from? What were things like in this part of the world 300 years ago, 400 years ago? We need to revive that curiosity, because it's from that revival that the decision makers will start to see that, wow, this is something Nigerians are clamoring for. And that way they can start to allocate the required resources in that area. But it must start with a reprogramming of the mindset. And I think that unless we have that thirst and that pride, we will always look at this sector as a boring sector with wood carvings and things that are no longer relevant. But that couldn't be further away from the truth. You look at any great civilization, you look at the Chinese, you look at the Indians, you look at the Israelis, they all have that love of their culture. You go to China, and even without going to China, you go to any Chinese restaurant anywhere in the world, you are bound to see iconography and images of Buddha, images of the dragons, images of the things that are essential to their culture. But we enter these places and we don't look at those iconographies as fetish. We look at it as foreign and interesting.
Yeah.
You go to an Indian restaurant and you will see carvings of the Hindu deities openly put in those restaurants to decorate the place. But I assure you that if you set up a traditional Nigerian restaurant and you had carvings of Shango and all the other deities, people would feel that, maybe I can't eat in this place. Maybe there's something fetish behind it.
Do you think our excessive emphasis on religion is equally affecting that aspect of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that we can have these sorts of conversations without looking at our colonial past and the impact the Christianity and Islam have had on our sense of identity. So if I believe that a museum is a place where the relics and the idols of the past have been kept, and I believe that there's something inherently dark or fetish about them, I'm not going to want to go and see them. If anything, I would say, you know what, let the objects just stay there. It's important to note that our culture is more appreciated outside Nigeria.
Of course, the last administration, there was this issue of recovering some of the stolen artifacts from things that ordinary.
Absolutely.
Some Nigerians here will look at it and say they're fetish, but
absolutely. So the NCMM is at the forefront of those efforts, and I'm sure that as the conversation progresses, we'll touch on that. But for me, it's important that we look at how our culture is appreciated outside, and that for us should be a clue that perhaps there are things and elements within our own culture that we're overlooking, right? Because when you look at these objects that were looted in 1897, specifically the Benin bronzes, when they were first discovered, the West they swore that there's no way Africans could have created these things. They said that the technique was too advanced for us, that there's no way we could have created them. But now we know that we did create these things, and not only did we create them, we had a thriving bronze casting guild in Benin that still exists till today. So for me, it's how do we start to promote these stories and promote this ideology so that the world doesn't continue to look at Africa as, these primitive people that, they were jumping from trees when we found them. That is far from the truth.
Okay, we'll speak more about promoting this this industry, especially our cultural heritage. When we come back, we'll take a little short break now, and then we'll come back, we'll speak more about it.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a short break. Stay with us. Thanks for being there. This is On the Spot with Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments, Olugbile Holloway. Projecting hours has always been the problem. If you look at, we're talking about national monuments. I think talk about how many? 65 national monuments. Many Nigerians, you ask, they don't even know where it is. Don't you think time have come where you organize events, pick monuments at centers and so on, to have exhibition for Nigerians, like an exhibition for Nigerians, always like a national ceremony that Nigerians will just go there and have that. Perhaps that may give it a kind of
a boost.
A boost.
Okay, I'll shed more light on the the differences between, basically, I'll shed more light on what a national monument is, okay? And we'll talk about some of the monuments. Now, with a monument, you have a location with a historical relevance. Good example of the two most prominent national monuments or heritage sites we have are the Osun Osogbo Sacred Grove and the Suko Cultural Landscape in Adamawa, right?
I think those are the two on the
UNESCO. Perfect, yes. So those are two UNESCO listed heritage sites. Now, if you recall, the first part of this conversation we had was around infrastructure. Infrastructure is essential in accessing some of these sites because they are in remote locations. For example, to access the Suka landscape in Adamawa, it is a very risky journey. Our curators and organizations that work with us in preserving this even have challenges themselves accessing it. You have locals there, but a place that is inaccessible is not marketable. Yes, you have certain monuments that are more accessible. For example, the old Secretariat in Lagos, that's accessible. But you still have to create an experience. You need to give people a reason to come there. So when talks with certain individuals in the private sector to see how we can identify a few of the monuments and create experiences around them. Because if you look at other parts of the world,
that means you have a lot to do with collaborating with state governments, because there are lots, from what you're talking about, the state government have to play a lot.
Correct.
In this. So
correct.
What have you been doing? Are you thinking towards that collaboration? 100%.
And I'm happy you mentioned the issue of the state government. With the state governments, I was recently in Osogbo because we've had some issues around encroachment around the Osogbo Grove into something we call the buffer zone. Okay. Now, one of the requirements for it to remain listed is that a certain area has to be around it left untouched as a buffer zone. Land grabbers and certain elements on ground have started selling the land, and we're currently fighting that battle to ensure that it is not delisted. One of the key meetings we had was with the state government around that issue. Another site that we have is the Ojukwu bunker. The Ojukwu bunker is the actual bunker Ojukwu used during the Biafra War. It still exists till today. It was built in 90 days, and if you see what they've built, it is unbelievable. We were in that state to discuss, this is Imo State, to discuss the Ojukwu bunker. Now, for us, you have to, sorry, did I say Imo? Abia State.
Abia State.
Yes, Abia. Can we take that part again?
No, that's more
okay. We'll just
take it out.
Yeah. So we were in Abia State through the Honorable Commissioner for Tourism. Invited us. We went to the Ojukwu bunker. We went to the National War Museum over there, and the meetings we were having with the Abia State government was all around collaboration and how they can give us that support. Because the truth is, the NCMM is a massive organization. There's only so much we can do. So definitely a strategic alliance with the various state governments is high on our agenda.
Okay. Okay, before you move on that, well, I want you to clarify more. When I look at sites in the country, I see some of them, I feel they are very beautiful, very attractive, but to have you have UNESCO recognizing just two, what is the criteria for? A lot of people want to know what's the criteria for having them.
There's a
them being certified
listed. So you see, to get a site listed by UNESCO, there are certain guidelines, and there's certain submissions that have to be made. So it has to have some historic relevance, right, to the people of that area, right? It also has to have a clear, I guess for artwork you would call it provenance, right? But for a site, the site too must have provenance. You must be able to trace the origin of that site going back a certain period of time, right? And in preparing a nomination dossier, that's what starts the process, right? I assure you that we are constantly in talks with UNESCO and their representatives through our heritage department in seeing how we can get certain sites listed. But these talks are ongoing, and there's a lot of negotiations involved, because as we're trying to get sites listed, I can assure you a lot of other countries are trying to get sites listed. And for UNESCO, it's important that they don't just list sites just because the country is pushing it. It must have some historical relevance to that country and must be able to add some value to humanity as a whole.
Okay, let's touch a bit about this. I can't have you, and then we'll not talk about this return of some of the stolen artifacts that the government was pursuing during the previous administration. Where are we now? Some were returned. Are you still pursuing more out there?
Absolutely. I think that, you see, when we talk about the repatriation of artifacts, that in itself is an entire conversation. Okay? You see, when an artifact is kept in a foreign museum, there is always a reference to the owner of the artifact. Okay? So, for us, there are two layers to it. The first step in any repatriation discussion is what we call a legal transfer of ownership. Okay? What this means is that the artifact may be in a foreign museum, but legally it belongs to Nigeria. Okay? So we've done that with the German government for over 1,000 Benin artifacts. They have been legally transferred, over 1,000. They have been legally transferred back to Nigeria, so Nigeria owns them. Okay? We recently signed the transfer agreement for 119 objects coming from the Netherlands. We've done the transfer of ownership, and the objects should be arriving in the country in the next couple of months. That has been signed, sealed, and done. But you see, for us, it's not so much that we want all the artifacts that are outside the country back. No, not necessarily.
Yeah, we can have museums outside the country too.
Yes, you can have your objects outside the country because you also have a diaspora. There are Nigerians in Germany that want to go to a German museum and see something that speaks to them. But it's important that the objects are in those museums the right way, with our consent. So that's why I said that repatriation is a broad discussion.
Everybody knows that this is coming from Nigeria.
This is coming from Nigeria. We get the credit for it, and there is an agreement that, okay, after a certain time period, this object can come back. And then we're always happy to loan out objects for exhibitions. We just loaned out 2 objects from Ife for an exhibition in the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. The exhibition was titled The Kings and Queens of Africa. And we loaned objects from our collection to Abu Dhabi. Those objects are still there as we speak. Once the exhibition is done, the objects will be brought back and kept in our museums.
Okay, we don't have time actually, but can you maybe in just 30 seconds give us what is the real potential? Because when you're talking about this, industry, where's the real potential there for Nigeria regarding job creation and even generating revenue?
Okay. The potential for heritage as a tourism driver is extremely huge. When we spoke, you touched on the hospitality industry. Okay? So let us look at the entire value chain. when tourists comes into a country to go to a tourist site, they're bringing money, they're going to buy food, they're going to stay in a hotel, they're going to use local transportation, correct? They may get a translator or a tour guide. So it's indirect job creation. It's not job creation in the sense of, oh, I'm working for this company. But by bringing in the tourists, you're bringing in money into your economy. And at different points of the value chain, people are benefiting from that. So once we can get these tourist sites going, our heritage centers, our museums up and running, and more tourists come into the country, it will knock-on effect. Even the lady down the road that sells akara in the morning, she's going to benefit because more people will buy her food. So it's a multiplier effect. That is the real potential of tourism.
Because I would have loved us to also to talk much, but I think our time is up. Thank you so much, Olugbile.
Thank you.
Holloway, Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments.
Thank you very much for having me.
Do appreciate.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that is it on the spot. Thank you for being there. See you next time.